Good morning, welcome to Ag Talking Raw, where I talk raw about agriculture and other things that are on my mind. Okay, so here we go. Agriculture. What's going on in agriculture? I'm looking at a huge shift from corn to beans in this area, and it just seems like if you want to buy seed corn, you can just buy seed corn. There's years ago there was, get your seed orders in before the 1st of January, or you're not going to have your seed order. This year it seems like no matter what I want, I can get. Now, of course, I haven't been on the seed corn market for 5 years. Yeah, 5 years, and because the last I grew corn was 2014. That was it. Fall of 2014, I was so disgusted with markets, and it wasn't the market so much. I was disgusted with the everything that had took place with growing corn and beans. I would have continued to grow corn over soybeans, but I decided that if I'm going to get out of grain, I might as well just get out of grain altogether, and that's that. Now, I do need to, come to terms with myself here on that decision. I have missed corn every year since I stopped growing it. Soybeans, not so much. For 5 years of the last 5 years of growing soybeans, I was out shooting deer. Actually since 1991, growing soybeans, I shot deer. There was a couple of years I took a hiatus from growing soybeans back then. In the early 2000s, I think it was late 90. Oh, it was 99, 2000. I think I quit with beans and then came back into them. Not that I wasn't going to ever grow them again. I was just so disgusted with fighting the deer. And after 99, we got some product that was really a nice deer repellent, worked well. So I went back into it, and then, had some decent years in growing beans, made some money doing it. So there you go. And then as the hay business grew, I just really, grain took a back seat. Didn't do a very good job of storing the grain as what I'd like to have done. Had some spoilage that I didn't want, and that sort of stuff happened. So I've been shopping for seed corn varieties, and, I haven't really talked to too many people, but online, you can choose your traits now instead of the seed guy coming around and saying, oh, buy this because it's, it'll do this, that, and the other thing. I can do my own research right online through many different companies and, do pretty well. DeKalb is up here for me. We've always had good luck with DeKalb. I'd like to try some Pioneer seed. We haven't used Pioneer seed since the 80s. I've never grown Pioneer seed. Now, I really want to. I do. I just want to throw that Pioneer out there. I thought it was kind of funny when I was over in the Philippines. Back in it had to be 2016 or 17. I have photos of. It had to be 2017. I was in the Philippines, and there's Pioneer seed in the Philippines. Crazy, huh? So Pioneer is really a global company at this point. It's not just, here in the United States. It's in the Philippines. It's more than likely everywhere around the world. And it was just really weird being at, what the hell was it? Mount Arayat, going to a Mount Arayat, and there at the foot of Mount Arayat is acres and acres of Pioneer seed. So they must be doing something right, and I'm sure they grew it cheap over there, or that was seed corn that they were going to ship back to U.S. I didn't see that they had detasseled anything, so it probably was just growing for their food. Now, years ago, we had a DeKalb variety. Years ago, we had a DeKalb variety that came in a little bag, and it was 80,000 kernels, and it was 25 pounds in the bag, or 23 pounds. I think it was 23 pounds. It was some ridiculously light bag of corn, and they were all the end kernels, not the butt end, but the top end kernels of the ear. So the guy's name was Skip, and he worked for a farm brokerage and supplied out of Allentown, New Jersey. He's dead now. He died a few years back, but I liked Skip. Skip was I don't know what his real name was, but we all called him Skip. But anyway, Skip came with these things, and he had this little Chevy S10 truck that was loaded to the hilt, and he had, I don't know, probably a ton of a ton of seed corn in there. But we never bought always from one place. We would buy DeKalb, we would buy Seba, we would buy Syngenta, Mycogen. Had good luck with Mycogen. Then we settled on Fielder's Choice years later, and then from Fielder's Choice, I grew Hubner's. Just grew different varieties of seed corn. But this was definitely a DeKalb variety, and these little bags, he brings them over and he drops them, like with one hand, he drops them at the foot of the pallet of seed that I had just got done stacking up, and I divided them up into the varieties that we needed. And he says, well, if you don't want it, he says, you can send it back. He says, everybody I've taken that to, they've rejected it and sent it back. I was like, well, we'll keep it, and if at the end of the planting season, then if it's still here, maybe we'll send it back. So we planted everything except for those 8 bags of it. We usually went with 8 bags of any given test variety. And those 8 bags sat in the back of the shop. We didn't plant them. We ran out, and I just refused. I was like, well, we'll just send them back. I just can't see that they're gonna do well. Anything that comes out with tiny little popcorn, it looked like popcorn, because I had opened one of the bags up to see what it looked like. Anyway, looked like popcorn. We went up to, I believe, CPS, Crop Production Services, out of Jutland, New Jersey, and we bought seed out of there. And I want to say it was Jock's seed, which has been gone now for many years. And that Jock's seed, that bag was huge. It was a huge bag of seed, and it had 80,000 kernels, and they were all flats, big, long, deep, flat seed. And we planted those, and I can tell you right where we planted it. We don't farm the property anymore. It was sold off, and somebody else, they sold it off, and now they farm it themselves. So it's it wasn't out for lease anymore. So anyways, we planted it there, and I remember combining that corn, and the ears, they were like 20 row ears, 22 row ears. I don't think any of them were 18s, but 20 to 22 row ears, and they were pretty long. And I remember looking in the combine, I had to go slower because the old TR70 couldn't fill the bin fast enough, and it was actually running out the back. So we were well over 200 bushels. And I just remember that bin filling up with what seemed like all flats. It's like there was no rounds. It was all flats. And that was the first time in my life that I actually was combining and dumping into a wagon as I was combining. And it seemed like I never emptied the damn bin. It was coming in that fast. So my dad, he pulled up with I'm sure it was a 4320, remember the old 4320s? It's still in the back of the shop there. I got to get that thing out and running. I want to put new tires on it this year and actually run that tractor because it's just a good thing to do. But anyways, a 4320 with 3 wagons. He had like 2 Parker, they were 3 Parker wagons, and they were only small, like 150s, and the grain bin held, or the combine held 150 bushels, in the bin. So we filled up one, maybe it was 125. So I remember filling the one completely up, and then by the time we got the second one full, that's when I finally, or halfway full, that was when I finally emptied out the bin, and we were just rolling. So he waited at the end of the field. I made another couple of rounds, and then he pulled up. I topped off the second one, and he just pulled those 3 wagons across the field until I had that thing full. And then he took off for home with it to unload it, and then, then I was done. I had a grain truck sitting there also, the old GMC. So I filled the combine up, topped off the truck, filled the combine up the rest of the way, and then I headed for home, and he was just finishing up those wagons, emptying them into the dryer when I got back there. And then I took off with the 4320 and, to go fill up the, it was not the 4430. I don't know why we didn't have the 4430. It was definitely the 4320. So I took off back to the farm, or back to the combine where I was going, and I remember I had a failure with the header. It just, something broke bad. So we dropped the corn header right in the 4 rows where it broke. It wasn't the corn header, it was the combine that broke. Combine had broke, and then I took off for home. Then somebody took my dad over to grab the 4320 and what little corn was in the one wagon, because I didn't get very far. And I went home, and I think it was the feeder house chain had broke going into the combine, so into the rotors. So anyway, that's what I remember of that jock's corn. So the next year, these 8 bags of seed are still in the shop. They're collecting dust. We used to grind feed in the shop building, where the shop is, and everything was just covered with dust and corn bees wings and all this stuff. It was always just a mess. And I remember getting a new seed corn in, and it was Seba. They came in blue bags at that time, and we had these 8 bags of DeKalb. And we ran out pretty quickly. We were just going to be more ambitious with the corn that year. We were milking more cows, and there were silage varieties that we had, and I was pushing to get bigger. And my dad was like, "Listen, we're phasing out, man. We're going to sell these cows off in a few years, and that's it. We're done farming." And that was where they were going in the late '80s, early '90s. They were phasing out, and then of course I got married, and I wanted to farm, so I kind of pushed harder. There was some AC and CU acres through the farm. It wasn't farm service. It was got AC. Yeah, ASCS office is what they called it back then. And but we had these different programs that the ground was in, and we could only brush hog them. And as I was getting after I got out of high school, that land was getting out of those programs, and my family, my mom, my dad, my grandmother, they didn't want to farm it anymore, so they just let it go. I've subsequently went back and picked all that ground up and more, obviously more. The one farm was awesome. The guys that farmed it, that wanted to farm it after us, they came in and dumped lime on there like there was no freaking tomorrow. It didn't help them any because of the deer problem, and I put it into corn, or I put it into hay after that. And that was in 1998, I put that in. The fall of 98, I put that all back into hay. And they had put lime on it. So the hay grew good. There was one field that was kind of tough, so I put soybeans on it, shot deer like there was no tomorrow, shot deer, but it grew good beans. And but anyway, eventually it went back to hay. And so those were in those programs. But I was pushing to get more ground, to actually, this stuff was coming out of the CRP programs and AC and CU acres. That was all going to the set-aside acres. That was coming out because the price of grain was climbing up, because there was a rather large amount of acreage that was put into these programs years before, 10 years prior, and it was set up to increase the cost of corn and soybeans, get it up for the farmers. At least that's what it was supposed to be. And we were paid not to farm it. So anyways, I remember going out with a 40-20, and I had to be 92. I went out with a 40-20 and a 5-bottom plow, and I was plowing under sticker bushes, because we were supposed to brush hog this ground, and then the last 2 years that the program was enacted, it was no longer necessary to brush hog because they signed up for a bird program. There was no bird grass planted, but there was multiflora rose bushes and shit like that starting to grow up in it. So I plowed down a bunch, as much as I could get plowed down with that old 40-20, and I'd get up at daylight, and I wouldn't come home until dark, or until I broke something. And that 40-20 with that 5-bottom 16, it was a 5-bottom 16, it wasn't a 14. Yeah, 5-bottom 16. It pulled hard, third gear, that was it. But I plowed, and I was, like a drunk plowing guy, Lord Muck and the other guys, they would be like, "Oh my God, Pandy, what's the matter with you?" But I was young, and I didn't really care about straight lines. I just cared that the soil got turned over, and I could roll it down, or, with the disc, and get something planted in there. And I wanted to put soybeans in, because at that time, soybeans were worth twice as much as corn for 1/3 the cost to get it in. And anyway, my dad says, I don't want to deal with soybeans because of the deer there. why don't you plant those 8 bags of seed? Well, I'll give them to you or whatever. I was like, I don't want to plant that crap. So we didn't even do a germination test on them. I figured I'll put that stuff out there, and if I get a 90 or 85-90% germination, life will be good. And I dumped that seed in there, and it came up to about this much in the bottom of the planter box. Usually a bag and a half in the corn planter box, and you're full. Well, this took 2 full bags, and it was only a third of the way full. And I planted, back then we were only planting 18,000 plant population, 18 to 22. That was the thing, You didn't plant this 36 to 40,000 plant population that they're doing today. So I planted it. It was a little late in the season, a little dry, and that shit just went boom out of the ground. It was like rocket ship out of the ground. I was like, holy cow, look at that. 3 days later, this corn is out of the ground. It was like, it was itching to grow. So we're just kind of like, wow, that was surprising. And I had planted, it would seem to be an awful lot. So you're looking at like 4 acres per bag. So what's 4 times 8? It's 32 acres. Just say 35 acres of that corn. And it grew so intensely and so vigorously, and it was a long season corn. What we would consider a full season corn, I think it was like a 105 or 108, something like that, and that's considered full season here. We can go to 115 or 116 day corn here, which I always had the best luck with. I really did. I always had the best luck with the full season 112, 115, 118 day corns. We put them in as early as we possibly could, and they were just a good, it was just a good variety. So, anyways, as this corn is growing, it has a deep green color. It has a vigorous growth pattern, and it was a medium tall corn. So medium ear set, tall stalk, because it was a silage corn. But we had no intentions of chopping it for silage. We just didn't. I never did. I wasn't going to. So as the season goes on, back then you wanted 2 ears on a stalk. Today, not so much. You don't want 2 ears. You want 1 ear, and it has to be somewhere between 3/4 and 1 pound to the pound each ear, and that's what you do. Now, we had put lime down on those fields before we planted, and it was ag-organic ag lime, which was a combination of human waste and fly ash from the cement mills, which was an awesome calcium source, and you got your trace minerals and other fine things from the sludge, including a few heavy metals, but we're well within the ppms that were allowable by law. And I remember broadcasting 12-24-24 over the top of it. Yep. 12-24-24 and liquid nitrogen for the nitrogen needs. I remember it was like 120 units of nitrogen, which today's standards is pretty kind of anemic, or not anemic, but light, light on the nitrogen. But through the 12-24-24, I added another 24 units of nitrogen to that. So, I was up there in that, I was up there in a 150 unit of nitrogen, and you want at least 1 unit of nitrogen per bushel of corn you want to raise, and 150 bushels was pretty much the maximum that we could ever raise on that farm anyway. Well, we watched it, we took care of it. Lasso, atrazine, or Dual was the herbicide program. We had pretty clean rows because of the vigor of the plant shading out any of the weeds. We didn't have any late season weeds like fall panicum or anything like that. But I remember going into that corn and with the combine, and we just pulled corn off of those fields, just yanked it off of there. It was unbelievable. From such a tiny, tiny little seed to this ginormous yield, which was well over 150 bushels to the acre. Now, I attribute that to a couple of things, because I've had this experience many times. Okay, so the seed, was it any better than the large seed? I wouldn't say so. Genetics possibly played a huge role in what it was. It was a silage variety. I'll never forget the top of the combine. And when I say medium tall, I mean the corn, the header was up all the way, and the tassel was above the roof of the combine. That's how tall this shit was tall. I never, ever, ever remember, and it didn't go down, which was nice, which was a big problem back in the day. You get a tall variety, and they would go down, especially the silage variety. You really wanted to get that in the silo before it started to turn, because the roots would deteriorate and it would fall over, especially with the size of the ears that were on there. And let me tell you, the ears, they look like jackass ears. So we did really, really well. Called Skip up that after we got done combining that corn and said, hey, listen, I'd like to get more of that seed. And they're like, nobody planted it. It was discontinued. That seed came out of Argentina. So that's what happened. So it was a one-hit wonder. We could have got it probably the year prior, the year that we actually planted the stuff, instead of, if we would have tried it, I definitely would have bought 20 or 30 bags of that stuff. It was unbelievable. We treated it no different than any of the other ground. But I will say that fallow ground, ground that has had a rest, and some people maybe think that I'm crazy on this one, but the old way of farming was you grew a grain for a couple 3 years, and then you let it lay fallow for a year. You put manure on it for that year or whatever you were going to do, and you would leave it lay fallow, or possibly put wheat in it in the fall of the fallow year, which has happened many times. I mean, I've done that lots of times, but I kind of attribute that the incredible growth of that stuff to, I would say, worm activity from fallow ground. And a lot of people don't give worms credit. They just don't. Worms do a lot of things. They convert organic matter to usable nutrients, and they aerate the soil and loosen compaction and all the other wonderful things. Now, I moldboard plowed that over. Okay? So when you moldboard plow it over, have you destroyed the worms? No. The destruction of worms really, well, not the first season anyway. The destruction of worms really comes from insecticides and other things like that. But this ground hadn't had any of that stuff in many, many years. And in the era of my grandparents and great grandparents of farming, they never had herbicides. They just cultivated. So you'd plow it over, you'd harrow it down, whether it was a disc harrow or spring tooth harrow, and then you would work that ground, pulverize it into a powder before you could plant it, because they didn't have disc openers. They had those what the hell would you even call them? The openers were like this wedge, and if there was a clod of dirt, it would make a mess, and you wouldn't get a good seed firmer. It wouldn't firm the seed into the ground, and it would make a mess. So, but they seemed to have decent crops for what they were doing at the time. So I kind of attribute a lot of the growth and the beauty of that crop was due to the fact that ground was fallow for 10 years. Actually, I think it was 12 years. It was 10 years into the CRP program, and then it was 2 years into this wildlife program that we didn't have to brush hog anything. And we got paid not to do anything to it, and that's where the multiflora rose bushes and the other bushes came in. Autumn olive trees and shit like that. You want to see them go through a plow. Holy cow. But anyways, it worked out really well. But back in those days, if you didn't get your seed order in on time, because all this CRP ground was coming out, and the most logical place to put it was in corn, that's what would happen. And then even for many years after that, corn was king, and if you didn't get your seed order in, you didn't get your seed corn. You didn't get the top picks, which suits me just fine, because, this is one thing about seed corn. You can take the highest yielding seed variety at $300 a bag. Let's just use $300. I've seen seed corn at $350 a bag years ago, and I'm sure it's still right there. Maybe not now because the price of corn is down. But you take a $300 a bag, with all the genetics and all the traits and all the treatments and all that stuff, and it consistently yields at 250 bushels to the acre on a seed test plot, get it into real world conditions, and it isn't 250 bushels. It's more like 185 or 195 or whatever. But the next competing or competitive seed variety by the same company is like $250. Yeah, $250 a bag less, but it performs consistently at 243 bushels to the acre. So 8 bushels, 7 bushels to the acre difference for $50. Well, last time I looked, it just doesn't pay to do that. So we would always just kind of settle for the lesser yielding ones because they were cheaper. The high dollar varieties were usually sold out pretty quickly. Maybe out in Iowa or Champaign or whatever, Illinois. I think it's Champaign, Illinois or whatever. Those areas out in that area where you can just throw the seed on the ground, come back in the fall, and have a bumper crop, and there you go. That'd be great. But here on the East Coast, it's a very, very, very different way of farming. We've had lots of challengers come into our area from other areas of the state where they have what I call idiot-proof ground. And there is such a thing as idiot-proof ground. I mean, my grandparents' farm, my mother's side of the family, any idiot can grow grain over there. It is just like primo soil. It's great. It's awesome. I grew corn and I grew soybeans over there. And the corn and the soybeans I grew over there, I mean, I could shake my head about it. It was just unreal. Threw the seed in the planter, went over there, put it in the ground, put the herbicide down, went away from it. Next fall, came in, 175 bushels of the acre. Didn't do anything different than I did at home and only got 125, 135 bushels to the acre. It's idiot-proof ground. It's just awesome soil. But we've had guys come from that area to come down to our area and only to fail within a couple of years and just pull out because they didn't know the soil conditions. They didn't know what the hell they were doing in that type of soil. Now, up at my grandparents' place, in Timmy Cornpicker's part of the world, that soil is amazing. I mean, when it's wet, you can sink a tractor right to the axles. But if it's a normal year, you get an inch of rain today, you can plant tomorrow. Whereas it would take me 3 or 4 days before I could plant. Because our soil is a clay base, heavy clay soil. Whereas that's a light sandy soil. And there's not much clay in it at all, but it's a very nice soil. There's clay in it, but it drains much nicer. Alfalfa ground, holy hell, you could, again, throw alfalfa up on those hills and voila, you've got alfalfa. So, it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of land. So, that's just the way it is. Yeah, so I guess I'm pretty much done with this. The seed corn is, I've reached out to a friend of mine. I might go down. He might still be milking cows right now, but I got to go down and talk to him because he was a seed dealer, and I've always liked the way his corn looked. And I'm not sure what variety or brand it was. I want to say it was Beck's, but I don't know. I'll have to check him out and see what he's got going on there, if he's still a dealer. If he's not a dealer, then I'll just go somewhere else. It's fine. But I'd like to try some of his also. But anyway. Okay, so for other news that's going on, the Trumpster, our president of the United States of America, whether you like it or not, has just declared a state of emergency at our southern border. And I knew it was going to happen. I mean, do I think it should happen? No. Is there an emergency? Yes. There has been for many, many years. It's actually been a pandemic. It's not even an emergency. It's a pandemic. These people have been crossing. They know that they're going to get in. They know they can walk across our border. There's no problems, or else these caravans wouldn't be coming. So, as you remember, the shutdown a month ago, the shutdown a month or so ago, was, supposedly devastating to the workers, but they all went back to work and got paid. What's the problem? So in order to get this wall funded, the wall or the barrier or the whatever funded, Congress has had a month to get their shit together and get it figured out. So the Democrats say, well, you know what? We're not going to give you the money you need. You need $5.7 billion to build the barriers and everything else that needs to be put up, along the border to make it safe and secure. I mean, you'll never secure it fully. I mean, they'll bring ladders, they'll bring shovels, they'll bring whatever it is. I mean, it's just like a smart mouse, You put an old Victor mousetrap in there and you bait it with peanut butter and the sucker learns not to bite it, he learns how to lick it. So they'll figure it out, and then you got to come up with the better mousetrap. So it's still not perfect. Nothing is perfect in this world, and it will be a deterrent for a lot, but it's not going to deter the determined. So anyway, I think Donald Trump knew that these Democrats were not going to do what he feels is necessary and what the American people feel is necessary. I was in New York City yesterday, believe it or not, and I saw the MAGA hats in a store, a New York store next to the embassy that we were in, and the Build the Wall shirts and stuff like that, right in the heart of New York City. I was pretty amazed that that place had this stuff in it, because I was under the assumption that New York City absolutely hated Donald Trump. But yet, they're selling his stuff. They're selling his stuff, ladies and gentlemen. I didn't buy it because I was in a hurry. I needed to get a pen for Teresa so she could fill out the paperwork that she needed to fill out at the embassy. This is for to declare our marriage in the Philippines. We are married, and we had to declare our marriage in the Philippines because that gives me perks in the Philippines, and it gives William a dual citizenship. So that's what the whole plan there is. It doesn't denounce her or his or my American citizenship. I have no desire to do that. Neither does Teresa, and neither do we want to denounce for William either. But it was something that needs to be done because we do have interests over there. Yes, we do. And in order to maintain and preserve our interests over there, we need Mr. William to be a dual citizen and all that great stuff. So anyway, as we're leaving, my dad calls and says, so, did you hear there's a riot in New York? I'm like, no, I didn't see anything. He says, good, you out of there? I said, yeah. And apparently there was some protesters or whatever protesting the fact that Donald Trump had declared a state of emergency. Now, a little bit of history on the three branches of government, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branches. If you did not know, those are the three branches of government. So those are your checks and balances. So if the president wants to do something and it is outside of his executive power, the legislation can file lawsuits or whatever. They can just kick it out, and actually, by the time it's executive, the Supreme Court can kick it out, say it's unconstitutional or exceeds your executive powers. So those are your checks and your balances. So you got Congress, the House, Senate, the Supreme Court or the judicial, and of course the executive is the President of the United States. Now, once upon a time, we had this wonderful president that everybody loved and just loved to death. And it didn't matter if he was getting his dick sucked off under the desk in the Oval Office by a lovely lady by Monica Lewinsky. He was under a democratically controlled Senate, House and Senate, Congress, and the Supreme Court had the Democrat heavy justices on it, and of course, the executive branch was a Democrat in the beginning of his term. Now, the second term, things changed. That was when he was impeached. But before he was impeached, his first term, he basically had carte blanche, same thing that Donald Trump had. He could do what he wanted. Now, the lovely part about this is that the legislative branch and the judicial branch actually gave Mr. Clinton more executive power. So executive power is dangerous. It is dangerous in a Democrat. It is dangerous in a Republican. It is dangerous in an independent. It's dangerous. It's dangerous because when you have an uncontrolled or an unchecked executive branch, the president, you don't have a president anymore. You have a dictator. So, the executive branch was granted many more perks and powers through in the Clinton years, and then during the Bush years, George Bush the second, he used the executive powers that were granted to the executive branch by the other two branches of government. He used them extensively. Now, when he was done with his term and Mr. Obama, Barry Obama, took office, do you remember his speech? I've got a pen and a phone. That was a very dictative speech right there, because he knew that he was getting more and more executive power. Now, that becomes dangerous. Even though in his second term, he lost the House and the Senate, it became Republican-controlled, and the checks and the balances all kind of realigned. So he couldn't just sign something into law without the judicial or the judicial was still under Democrat. I think it was an even slice, but the legislative was now Republican controlled. So it was like, instead of it all being tilted this way, the scales kind of are teetering, because that's the way they are. You have some liberal Republicans and you have some conservative Democrats, which the conservative Democrats getting less and less all the time. We're leaning so far to the left that the scale, it's going to be harder and harder to tip the scale back towards to the level that it should be. So anyways, during the Obama years, the legislative and the judicial branches actually gave the President of the United States, or the executive branch, more executive power. So that's where the pen and the phone speech came in, because he knew that he had this power. He had more power than any other president prior to him, more dictative power. And when he realized he wasn't going to have the power that he really, really wanted, he appointed czars. Right? Czars, you remember that from the Russian Tsar when they overthrew the Russian government, and the Tsar was overthrown, killed, murdered, and I think Anastasia was the princess that escaped. Was the only one that escaped. She was like 5 years old or whatnot. But anyways, he enacted czars, which is a descriptive name that should never be in the United States. But anyways, he did that, and that was to bypass some of the limitations of his power. So Obama goes through his terms, both terms. He loses the House and Senate in his second term, limiting his power. The czars are enacted. They can do more that he can't do because he's limited, and then his term is over, and Hillary didn't get elected. If Hillary would have gotten elected, it would have been crazy. But I don't think the Democrats would have gained the House back. I really don't, if Hillary was elected. So there would have been a little, but it's still, we'd be at war with North Korea for sure. We were headed that way. The ceasefire was just a ceasefire. The war never really ended, but you can just step right back into that 70 years later, 65, 70 years later. So anyway, along comes Donald Trump, which is like the worst thing that could happen to the Democrats and the Republicans. Because Donald was a Democrat at one point. He switched sides. That is one thing that 90% of the young folk don't remember, is that Donald is a New Yorker, man. He's a New Yorker. He was a Democrat. And you know what? I'm glad he switched sides. I really am. I'm glad he went to the conservative side. Even though, is he really conservative in the money that he wants to spend? Is he? But what he is conservative in our values and what we need and what we want and what's best for the American people. And, a lot of times people put stuff off because it's too expensive. It's like, oh, we don't need a wall. It's just going to cost too much money. But then what comes across the wall is costing you more money than the initial build of the wall. And that's what's happened. So $5.7 billion is nothing. To build a wall where there's $100 billion a year, I think it's $100 billion a year, gets spent in illegal immigration. And we got to stop that. So if it costs us $5.7 billion to cut that in half, I'm for it. If it cuts it by a third, I'm for it. If it cuts it by a quarter, I'm still for it because it's less than what it costs without spending the $5.7 billion. So Donald says, I need $5.7 billion. The old cadaver, Nancy Pelosi, stands up and she's like, sorry, I'm not going to give you any $5.7 billion. I'll give you $6 million. Well, $6 million, it's like water in a toilet. You just flush it and it's gone. And you don't even know that you flushed anything. It's $6 million is nothing. So Donald's a pretty smart guy. He's researched this already. He's got people researching, and he's like, hey, listen, we need $5.7 billion, and that old scab isn't going to give it to us. We weren't going to get it when we controlled the House and the Senate also because we needed 60 votes in order to get the wall passed, so we weren't going to get that anyway. But we got to make the Democratic Party look like the assholes that they really are. So we're just going to wait. We're going to wait. Now, there's a lot of people out there that think that Donald should have just said, we're going to build that wall and we're going to get the votes. He didn't have the votes. He just did not have the votes. And the opposition would still be the same as what it is today. It would be worse. So there's a method to his madness. There is a method to his madness. So I need $5.7 billion. He knows damn well that Nancy isn't going to give it to him, or whoever was going to be the leader of the House. He knew that they were not going to give it to him. It's not going to happen. But he knows that if they don't give it to him, that he can declare a state of emergency. Now, he has the right to declare a state of emergency. Now, 25 years ago, he would have had a chance of the right to declare a state of emergency, and then they would have to do something about it. But because of the Clinton and the Obama years, they were given the executive power. The president was given the executive power to do just what Donald Trump is doing. The problem is it's backfiring against the Democratic Party. And they don't want to see that. So they're all like pulling their freaking hair out. How can he do this? Why is he doing this? But if they look back on their own history and what they did to give the executive branch the amount of power that Donald Trump is able to wield against their party, they should have been a little smarter about it. Like, hey, this is not how it's actually supposed to work. The checks and the balances have to meet in the middle. And they don't want that. So the Democratic Party was moving more towards a dictatorship. They want this dictatorship where the executive branch has more power than the judicial and the legislative branch. And right now, by just a few simple words on a piece of paper, I declare a national state of emergency at the southern border. Now Donald Trump doesn't get $5.7 billion. Donald Trump gets $8 billion. Donald Trump knew he was going to get $8 billion. Now, I'm pretty sure that Nancy Pelosi knew that he was going to get $8 billion. I'm pretty sure, because if she didn't, they would have passed something. They would have passed $4.6 billion or $4.8 billion or something better than what they did, $1.6 billion. Now, he gets $1.6 billion and he's got access to $8 billion. So $9.6 billion, almost $10 billion now, because he signed it, He signed the budget. So, okay, fine. I get $1.6 billion. I don't need the 5.7. You give me 1.6, I declare a national emergency, which I have the right to do because of what you people have done in the past. Yes, Nancy Pelosi was part of that. She's been in politics that long that she helped. And the Ruth Bader Ginsburg broad that's on her deathbed that has said, I don't care if I die, put me on life support until Donald Trump is out of office. And that actually happened. So those people gave the executive branch the power that Donald Trump is wielding. And, of course, now there's a couple of watchdog groups that have filed some lawsuits, which will thankfully get, we need the wall. I mean, let's put it this way. We don't need the wall. We need border security. We need to stop these caravans from coming in. We need to stop these leeches from sucking off of our system from hardworking men and women like you and me and everybody else that has a job in this country. And that is just the long and the short of it. A virtual wall where there's supposed to be this invisible barrier. Without death, nobody will ever adhere to the laws or the rule of that wall. There's no wall. There is no wall. You ever see those mimes on the streets of New York? Where they're doing this shit? Is that how it's supposed to be? Unless there's machine gun batteries machine gun towers and batteries from artillery and drones with Hellfire missiles and shit like that, it isn't a wall. So we need border security, and if it takes Donald Trump to do exactly what he's doing to get us border security, I'm all for it. And I'm sure there's a lot of red-blooded Americans out there that are for it. And I'll tell you what else I'm for. We want this done, and we want it done quickly. We want it done before he's out of office. Now, he could very well be voted out of office in 2020. It's a possibility. I don't think that this is going to backfire on him in the true red-blooded American circle in which he represents. But I was in New York City yesterday. There's a lot of rats in there, man. I'm telling you, there's a lot of rats in there. And this wonderful, beautiful face of mine with this nice white color, pinkish colored skin, I'm a minority in there. Now, I don't mind being a minority. It's fine. I don't care as long as I'm treated with respect. I can respect you, you respect me. I'm okay with it. But when you come to this country, you become an American. You don't come to this country and try to convert America to the shithole that you came from. Because there's a reason you left. There's a reason you left the shithole you left. Because, you guessed it, it was a shithole. So, that's it. So when you have millions and millions and millions of people in these cities that are in Democrat control, and they think it's the greatest thing in the world to be given everything that they can get. I mean, when you have people saying, we need to be more like Venezuela, or we need to be Sweden. Sweden is a socialist country that works. Sweden is not socialist. Sweden had socialist programs that were socialist, like to the point where that country was collapsing. And guess what? They thought about it like, hey, wait a minute. We need to stop doing what we're doing, or we are going to collapse our own country and we will become a third world shithole. I'm not saying that third world countries are shitholes. I'm just saying certain ones are. And Sweden is no longer under those socialist programs. They gave a lot of them up. And yes, their taxes are higher than they are in the United States because there still is some socialist programs, but they found some kind of a balance between this. They took away, they went back to a capitalist society. Yes, a capitalist with social intervention or governmental, government intervention. There's certain things that the government does, so they tax the hell out of you and they give you free health care. It's not free because you're paying for it through your taxes. But the state-controlled manufacturing, state-controlled jobs, workforce that was taken away from private companies by the government, they have now been turned back over to the private sector where now they are thriving. So when you see Bernie Sanders saying, Sweden's a socialist country, we need to go after them, or we need to model ourselves after him. No, we don't. They need to model themselves after us a little bit more than what they are and get their taxes lowered. Private insurance means competition. Competition between private insurance means cheaper insurance for everybody involved. Healthcare is out of control. It's out of control. And as the government gets into it, if you've noticed, your prescription shit has gone up higher, and higher. Keep it up, just keep it up. We need more socialist programs because we aren't paying enough. And then we get this Cortez woman. Holy shit. Is there like a wind tunnel behind her eyes and between her ears? We need to it's crazy. Anyway, I get too far off the mark. Venezuela, 1999, Hugo Chavez. If you don't like what I'm doing for your country, I will step down in 2 years. 20 years later, he's dead, but his brother took over and he is not backing down. So there's some things going on in Venezuela that, well, a dozen eggs is like $400 US. People are starving to death. Homeless rate in Venezuela is like 25%. So 25% of that country is out on the streets because they're homeless. So we need to be more like that. Our homeless rate is 0.17. 0.17. There's technically, 600,000 people homeless? 60,000 people homeless? I think it's only 60,000. 60,000 homeless people. Now, if you've ever met a homeless person, I met a brother of a homeless person. His brother is homeless, and he chooses that lifestyle. He says, I bring him home, I find him, I bring him home, I give him a place to stay, he steals my money, he sells, steals my stuff, sells them, buys drugs, and he's homeless again. He can't conform. So there's a percentage of people that are homeless that really, truly want to be homeless. You could take the gift horse and then sell it for drugs, and then you're homeless again, instead of taking what the gift horse has to give you. And that's just the way it is. And that's probably a very large percentage of the homeless people. Now, you have homeless people that don't want to be homeless. And homeless people that don't want to be homeless are the type of people that try to get away from the homeless lifestyle. Like, a mother and her child, or a woman that was married to a man that made millions of dollars, and he lost in the stock market, blew his fucking brains out, and now she doesn't even have a home. She will find some way to get off the streets. But people that want to be homeless will always be homeless. I was in New York City yesterday. I saw homeless people. They're out there shaking a can like this. Give me your money, give me your money, give me your money. Well, that's not getting off your ass and going and getting a job. That's you out there shaking a fucking can begging for money. That isn't happening. I won't give it. Now, there was two black guys that came up to me, handed me a CD. I was like, oh, okay, thank you. And I started walking away. Hey, whoa, you got to pay me for that. I was like, you handed it to me. Well, could you donate some money for it? I was like, well, I don't know that I'm even going to like what you got here. He's like, well, even if you don't, it's at least worth $1. I'm like, not if I don't like it. And I handed it back to him. He's like, well, could you at least donate $1 for your time? I was like, my wife's got the money, and I walked off. I'm sure he was pissed. But again, now that guy's actually trying. He was giving something for something. But whatever. Such is life. Oh, he was frustrated with me. He asked me where I was from. I said, I'm from New Jersey, the other side of the state. He said, oh, me too. I was like, you ain't from where I'm from, pal. Not that it matters, but he was trying to connect with me on that. And I'm sure if I said I'm from Illinois, he would have said, yeah, me too, south side of Chicago. That's what he would have said, but oh well. Anyhow, wow, 52 minutes of me talking. So anyways, Donald Trump knew that this was going to happen. He knew it months ago. He knew it a year ago that this was going to happen. And he also knew that in order to build that big, beautiful wall, he knew he wasn't going to get it granted to him through Congress. He knew it was going to have to go through the executive branch, his administration. He's had lawyers working on it for months, and he also knew that the pot was much bigger than if he'd have got the $5.7 billion. Now, this just gives the Democrats millions of dollars, or not millions of dollars, this gives the Democrats talking points. I'm sure right now, if I go down to CNN, they're on there saying, this dictator needs to be stopped. But when Barack Obama says, I got a pen and a phone, he's a hero. So I'm sure if I was to go turn that shit on, that's what I would hear. MSNBC, ABC, CBS, all of the talking heads that really don't even report the facts of it. The facts are Donald Trump knew he was playing a game. He plays the long game. He doesn't play the short game. Back in the 80s when he went bankrupt down in Atlantic City, do you honestly think that he didn't know he was going to come out smelling out of the sewer, smelling like a rose? He knew it. He knew it. He knew it so well. He's like, this is what it takes. This is the game. This is the loopholes that I got to play through. He came out of the sewers smelling like a rose. And he's doing the same thing. He's applying the same tactics in his presidency as he did in his life. He's a billionaire. Now, if he can make us more money and make our lives better here in the United States by applying the tactics that he learned over the years in business, I'm okay with that. I am okay with that. And if it pisses off Nancy Pelosi, Good for him. If it pisses off anybody down there, the swamp, anyone in the swamp, Republican, Independent, Democrat, doesn't matter. If you're pissing them off, you're doing something right. That's all there is to it. You are pissing somebody off. You're doing something right. You're not conforming to the norm. You know, the normus or the normal or the status quo is, this is not how we do business in Washington. You're not being very presidential here. You know, and you get to hear that crap over and over and over again. What is a president? President is a leader. He's to look at a problem, find a solution, and solve it, not put away while there's national emergencies going on. Okay? Now, Donald Trump plays golf. He owns his golf courses. But that man works. He's working. Hey, what the hell? My stupid telephone goes ding ding. 2 o'clock in the morning. It's Donald Trump. What are you doing up at 2 o'clock in the morning? He's working. Just finished this. Blah, blah, blah. So he works a lot. And he does get time off. Obviously he gets time off. But did you notice that Melania and his son, Barron, they're in Mar-a-Lago, they're somewhere else, you know, they're taking these vacations while the president's working. And if you remember the former president, Barack Obama, or Barry, he was in Hawaii. His wife and kids were in Hawaii for 2 weeks, and he goes over for a week, flies back to Washington for a week, then flies back to Hawaii for a week. Do you know how many $1 million it costs to fly Air Force One? Especially with 2 F-18s trailing and the support staff in Air Force Two behind them. There's billions of dollars a year, you know, just to fly this guy to vacation. Now, I don't know. I just don't know if it's going to be, if it's going to happen. You know, there are some lawsuits against the national emergency. I think it's going to happen. I really do. I think that he did his research before he declared it. And I'm sure with the appointment of Judge Kavanaugh, really kind of, it may take a little bit longer to get this thing done. But Judge Kavanaugh is the right guy for the job. And I think we're going to have border security. But as a businessman, if you want something done, throw money at it, right? So if there's a project and it's supposed to take 3 years and you want it done in 2 years, you give a bonus. Hey, we got a wall that needs to be built before I'm out of office, because if it's not and a Democrat gets in here, we're going to have big problems. They're going to want to shut this thing down, and they're going to try their hardest to shut it down. So here's an extra $100 million if you get it done in the 2 years that you got left. It can happen. It's only 230 miles. I mean, I've seen people do amazing things. Years ago, there was a tire fire under a bridge in Philadelphia. I mean, burnt the fucker right up, you know, weakened the structure, and it was like, oh my God, Route 95, what are we going to do? It'll be 2 years before they get this bridge fixed. 2 years, my ass. The mayor, what the hell is his name now? Was it the mayor? It was a governor of Pennsylvania. Oh, God, his face is, I can see his face. He wasn't a great governor. He was an asshole. But he said, get this bridge up in a month, no more than 2, and we will give you a $10,000 a day bonus. Fuck, that bridge was up in 3 weeks. Tore down, demoed, put a new bridge up. Like 3 weeks, done. 2 months to 3 weeks. Yay. Now, they've been working on 95 cents. There's no bonuses left. These fuckers, man, they're spending some time. Well, anyway, you know what? I'm at 58 minutes. I better get off of this thing. Grow corn, grow beans, grow wheat, grow whatever you're going to grow, but grow it well. Anyway, have a good day, have a good time, and hope you enjoy this one. Thank you.